Evening all. Well, first of all, I'd like to start off by welcoming all my new subscribers. I've had quite a lot in the last few days. Welcome aboard. I hope you enjoy the channel. If I knew the way to boost my subscriber count was to eat a load of biscuits and appear as a smartass on an internet pub quiz, I would have done that years ago. But whatever. Hope you enjoy what I do here. I'm counting down in my series on top 10 most effective people on the anti-left, and we're at number 4. And my choice is Ben Shapiro. But before we start talking about Ben Shapiro, I'd like to say a big hello to our sponsors, Birch Gold. Hello, Birch Gold! Right, so Ben Shapiro. I've done another video on this. It was kind of like a rebuttal to Academic Agent's video on why I thought Ben Shapiro was more effective as an opponent of the left than Academic Agent thought. He thought Paul Joseph Watson was more effective, and I have done this. On my list, I've put Paul Joseph Watson at number 5 and Ben Shapiro at number 4. Why have I done that? Well, I will be covering a little bit of what I went over in my previous video. Apologies for that. But I hope I'm going to give it a new twist because things change very quickly, and I want to assess where Ben Shapiro is now and why he is so effective given some recent developments in the culture wars. And I'd like to start by talking about the culture wars because I think this is very important to understand why Ben Shapiro is effective, slightly more effective than Paul Joseph Watson. Now, we're in the culture wars. We're right in the thick of it. And an analogy I like to use is the game Fortnite. You kids will know what I'm talking about. So at the moment in Fortnite, there is a variation on the game called Disco Domination. And it's a twist on the standard Fortnite game where when you land on the island and you pick up your weapons and you go and fight, your team has got to dominate these dance floors. Now, normally in Fortnite, you win by killing everybody else, right? You have to be the last person standing, the last team standing. In Disco Domination, kills are less important than getting onto the dance floor and shaking your booty. That's how you win the game. You win the game by dancing on the dance floors, not just by shooting people. Shooting people is a way of slowing the opposition down, but it's not how you win. And this is what we are with the culture wars. Now, Paul Joseph Watson might be a better shot than Ben Shapiro. Paul Joseph Watson, I've likened him before to a bare-knuckle boxer, and Ben Shapiro is more like a fencer. So in this scenario, if I use my Fortnite analogy, Paul Joseph Watson has landed on the island. He's tooled up with his legendary Scar, his blue pump-action shotgun, and a stack of clinger bombs, and he's out there blatting the opposition. Ben Shapiro's the one who's going for the dance floor. He's going to win us the points. So how does this translate into reality? Well, the thing is that we still have a mainstream media. It's waning in popularity, but it still has traction. And we're in a fight for the hearts and minds of the normies. You see, this is the whole thing about the culture wars, is that we've got the very hard and the progressive left who are trying to shift the culture and undermine Western liberalism, democracy, Western civilization with their progressive agenda. And they're making all kinds of unholy alliances with very authoritarian ideas, ideologies, religions, whatever. And we've got the mainstream, the extreme right, frankly, are a bunch of whack jobs, and they're just not numerous enough to have that much of a pull in society. Then the far right are not the ones who are going to win the hearts and minds of the normies. No, so that just leaves centrists, conservatives, libertarians, and the centre right to try and win the hearts and minds of Joe Public away from the progressive left. But the progressive left have got the dance floors. That's the thing. We on the right, on the centre, are running around, taking very accurate pot shots at our opponents, right? Defeating them in argument, defeating them with reason, defeating them in debate. But they've got the dance floors still. And we haven't got our guys or girls on the dance floors. See where I'm going with this? And this is what Shapiro represents. He's on CNN. Now, Academic Agent said that getting on CNN or mainstream media weakens his brand. He's legitimizing the fake news of mainstream media. But I disagree. This is, again, about we need our man in, right? Because the normies, right? The normies still read the broadsheet newspapers. In the UK, they still trust the BBC because the BBC is ingrained from birth. From birth, you're ingrained to kind of look up to the BBC because of the reputation. They've got almost a century of reputation to capitalise on, even though they are rapidly undermining themselves in recent years. They still have cachet. When people, normal people, go on holiday and they're staying in their hotel rooms, they've got the hotel television, they switch to CNN. So these brands, no matter how tainted they are, no matter how rubbish their news service is, no matter how biased they get, the name, the brand still pulls the normies in. And we need Ben Shapiro. This is what he's so good at. He is the person on the right that can get into these places. He can get onto Bill Maher. He can get onto CNN. He can get onto MSNBC. And they can't refuse him, because if those networks said, oh, we're not having Shapiro on because he represents everything that we don't like, it exposes them even more bias. They have to have him on just so that they can make a modicum. And Shapiro makes a full advantage. He takes full advantage of when he gets in there, of putting his point across. And he does it in such a rational way. I know people who are not, I would call them political flotsam. They don't think that much about politics in their day-to-day lives. They're not invested in the culture war. They probably don't even know the term, the culture war. But what they do is that they listen to people, and then they find somebody that resonates with them. And this is what happens with Shapiro. I know lots of people in the UK because, oh, I've seen that Ben Shapiro. He's really good. And yep, he's won them back. He's pulling the normies back from the brink, because look at what's happening in our cultures now. Mainstream media have gone very progressive left, not just kind of soft liberal. I mean, really progressive left. And it's starting to get into our companies. These, what I call normies, just the average people in their workplaces, they'll now have diversity officers. They'll have quotas. They'll have things that they can and can't say. They'll be being sent to bias training. Okay, this is happening across the mainstream. It's infiltrating everywhere. And you need people like Ben Shapiro to put the conservative voice across into these areas where people like Paul Joseph Watson will be excluded from. Even though Paul Joseph Watson punches harder than Ben Shapiro. But Shapiro can get into these places. And he does put his point across. Now, another thing that I recommend people do to understand Shapiro is he's written a book, and there's also a video on YouTube that he's done, a talk about the book. And it's his tactics for debating the left. And it makes very good reading because it shows how he goes in and debates with the left, and it's useful to know. It's a useful tool to know how to do it. And one of the things he says, and this is where people think he cucks, but I don't think he does, and he says one of the principles of debating the left is occasionally you have to give them a small victory that doesn't matter in the big picture. So, for example, somebody puts him on the spot, a liberal will put him on the spot and say, is there any kind of liberal idea that you're willing to agree has some validity? You see, they're trying to trap him. If he says no, absolutely not, then they can portray him as an extremist. But what he says is, he says something like, "I'm willing to consider legalizing marijuana," or that he's neutral on it now. Or the other one that he says is he's willing to accept some of the climate change claims. Now you think, oh, he's cucked on that, but he hasn't, because what he follows that up with, I'm willing to listen to climate change evidence that's very scientific, very rational, and without the political agenda. So he's giving the left a small victory, but it doesn't matter in the long run because he set the framework. He's saying, I'm willing to listen to rational, science-based evidence for climate change, but I'm not willing to go along with a cabal of politically motivated scientists and activists. See, that's how he does it. And I think it's very useful. The other thing that Shapiro does is that when he goes on his speaking tours, he has exposed the NPC meme. He is an embodiment. What I mean is that he goes along with the NPC meme. He thinks it's very good. But what I mean by this is that when he goes on his speaking tours, he is not saying anything that is truly offensive. He's putting forward conservative opinions, very forcefully, very well thought out, but he is not going in there as a kind of rabble rouser or any kind of troublemaker. He's just stating his opinion. So those people who go and protest and try and have his talks shut down, right, they're exposing them as NPCs. And there's a very good commentator on YouTube called Nuance Bro. He's quite new on the scene, but he interviews people who are outside a Ben Shapiro talk, and they're protesting, saying, ban this. And he asks them, what is it about Ben Shapiro that you think is so bad that he needs to be banned? And they can't come up with an answer. They go, well, I heard he's a conservative, and I heard he's with, and it exposes them as NPCs. This is great. If you are opposed to Ben Shapiro having a platform to speak, you are an NPC. Right? He is the perfect illustration. If you protest against Ben Shapiro, you're an NPC, because you just cannot. You don't even have a valid reason to shut him down, because there are no valid reasons to shut him down from talking. So if you're doing that, it's because you're accepting orders. These people who protest, they don't even know why they're protesting Ben Shapiro. It's just that somebody higher up in their left-wing group chain of command has told them, go and protest against Ben Shapiro because we say so. So this is why he is effective. He can get into the places that are the very tough people on the anti-left can't get to, can't reach. He is there to win the normies. That's what Ben Shapiro does. That's his function. Is in the culture wars, he's getting onto the disco floor. While we're all doing the shooting and the punch-ups, he's on the dance floor, winning the normies, winning the points. And so if you forgive my very strange analogy to Fortnite, on that note, it's just over 12 minutes. I need a drink and a biscuit. And until next time, I wish you a very good weekend. Don't forget the clocks go back. Okay, good night.